Good morning to the world. My name is Dairuku Sutane and I am a Victoria 3 fanatic. I have put so much time invested into this game that I've actually started to forget the faces of my loved ones. Perhaps that's why I have been fortunate enough to see some of the rarest countries form in games, countries that I didn't even know existed. Countries that are so far out of the realm of possibility that the AI must have jumped through 1,000 hoops to form them. However, there are still countries out there that I have never seen. Countries that I don't think are even possible for the AI to form on their own without deep involvement from the player. Perhaps equally as disconcerting is the fact that these countries are exceptionally difficult even for an advanced player to be able to form, due to unreasonable expectations required to form each of these. The 5 most rare formable nations in Victoria 3. However, before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to thank everybody who has been with me since the beginning. You guys make these videos possible. Though, if you are new to the channel, please take a moment to subscribe. We'd love to have you as part of our growing community. Anyhow, let's get into the video. The first on our checklist of rarely formed countries is the democratic stronghold of Czechoslovakia. One of the most prosperous countries during the interwar period after the fall of the Empire of Austria-Hungary in 1918. In Victoria 3, however, Czechoslovakia is one of the least likely countries to be formed. The high probability of smaller countries being released should Austria be dissolved, coupled with the high probability of Germany being formed if Austria ended up weak enough to be overtaken by Prussia, makes this country highly unlikely to ever be seen for long periods of time. However, due to the fact that it can be fully released as a country from Austria, and due to the fact that it requires only a single country to be defeated to be formed, this is not the most difficult country to create should the player ever decide to attempt its formation. As such, Czechoslovakia does not get placed particularly high on this list, putting it instead firmly in the number 5 spot. No matter where you go, Yugoslavia remains one of the rarest countries formed in Victoria 3. The land of the Southern Slavs, a kingdom also formed after the fall of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in 1918, suffered greatly due to its instability and multi-ethnic disunion. You should know, however, you are more likely to see a Yugo on the road than you are to ever see Yugoslavia form in game. Much like the vehicle, the AI is very likely to crash and burn long before it can gather the necessary states required to form this difficult country. This is because you will need to take over Austrian and Ottoman states, putting the difficulty bar a little too high for the game's AI. Even advanced players will find this task a little on the difficult side. Not only will you need to begin as Serbia, or heaven forbid, Montenegro, 2 relatively tiny countries surrounded by great powers, but you'll need to defeat those great powers to make the land of the Southern Slavs a reality. You'll be doing anything but living Dravida Loka when it comes to Dravida Nadu. Though it's known as the land of the Dravidians, the actual potential borders of the country would consist of many cultures from the mighty Tamil to the resilient Telugu. Regardless of this, Dravida Nadu is a terrifying prospect to any would-be unifiers of India should it actually form. Though the possibility of its formation is exceptionally remote, especially considering the ultimately lofty task of defeating the great powers who happen to hold treaty ports or land in 3 of the states required to form. That means the AI is very unlikely to push forward towards the creation of this potentially mighty country. Even great players will have a hard time managing to form this country, especially since it means you'll have to start off as one of the puppets of the British East India Company. Mysore might have the best chance to pull this off, but eventually you'll have no choice but to face off against a great power in both the India Independence War, but also the wars for the treaty ports necessary to form Dravida Nadu. Due to the rarity of Russia ever imploding in most games, people don't even know about the existence of its releasable countries of Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. So it's probably no wonder that most people don't even know about the formable nation of Transcaucasia. Though this is more of a geographical region of the world than an actual country, Transcaucasia can be formed by collecting 4 of the 5 states that span the Caucasus Mountains. This can be done entirely by fighting with Russia, but Kars, a part of the Ottoman Empire, can also be taken. Of course, the Russian part of Kars will also need to be acquired to fully unify the state so that it counts. Due to the rarity of the necessary countries ever being released, thanks to the low possibility of AI Russia ever collapsing, you will likely never see this country form on its own. As a player, you will first need to release Georgia, Azerbaijan, or Armenia to play as to even be able to form this country. Then, you will have to contend with Russia to fulfill the necessary requirements. It's not impossible, but it's a lofty task even for advanced players. When Tunisia colonize a sizable proportion of the states necessary to form a country, you're likely to run into a large number of problems. Polynesia, a sub-region of Oceania, making up more than 1,000 islands scattered over the central and southern Pacific, is beset from all sides with problems that will take a lot of effort to overcome. The first is the sheer impossibility of beating the great powers to colonizing the majority of the necessary states. Starting as Hawaii, Tahiti, or as the United Tribes has you at a severe technological disadvantage, meaning you will likely never colonize the islands first. Even Tahiti, who happens to start with the Polynesian culture, will not be able to colonize the lands faster than the great powers despite not suffering from malaria effects, as they likely won't even be able to see the islands until they first research the necessary technologies. Worse still, there are bugs that prevent the great powers from fully colonizing the lands of certain states like the Solomon Islands, Kanak, Micronesia, and Bougainville. If the great powers can't colonize the impassable lands, those states will never be fully unified, and they will remain split forever, making them inaccessible for the needed number of states to form Polynesia. Even if you are lucky enough to beat the great powers before they can bug out the majority of the islands, you'll still be beaten to the punch on other islands. That means you will clearly have to fight France or Britain for the rest of the states, a lofty task for tiny countries like Tahiti, Hawaii, and the United Tribes. Therefore, the likelihood of you ever seeing Polynesia in any of your games is effectively zero. The AI will likely never be able to form this nation. Even ultra-advanced players will struggle to get this nation formed, as there is always a strong likelihood that they will never be able to gather enough islands even after conquering them due to the impassable terrain bug. You'll need not only a great deal of skill to make the small nation strong enough to beat the great powers, but a great deal of luck to get all of the states necessary. And that is why Polynesia is the #1 rarest formable nation in Victoria 3. I'd like to thank everybody who watched this far into the video. I understand it's a little different than my typical content, but I'm a man who likes to experiment with new things. Again, if you're new to my channel, I typically do guides and playthroughs, so if you're interested in those things, make sure to click the pop-up here to see me actually forming what I consider to be the hardest formable, the country of Polynesia. Anyhow, good night and enjoy playing Victoria 3, and remember, Hail Hydra Cat.